Okay, hello, everyone. In this episode of Love, Sex, and Pleasure, I am here to share with you a Buddhist view and a concept from one of my beloved teachers, Thich Nhat Hanh, around love and justice and taking action in our world towards creating a better place in these chaotic times that has been really helping me navigate these pretty wild times here on planet Earth. And this episode is for you if you have been struggling with balancing work, life, your relationships, your sanity amidst all of the crisis that's been happening to us. It's for you if you felt guilty about how you're showing up or how you're not showing up. You feel guilty about experiencing pleasure while so much is happening. You are conflicted maybe about activism, about polarization, how you see people showing up online or not showing up online. And it all just feels like way too fucking much, which I know it is. I love you. We're going to get through this together. And I hope that this episode is something that can really help you. So, a little bit of context that I want to give that has been helpful for me in terms of framing my own grief, framing my own struggles during this time is a concept that I want to introduce to us called polycrisis, which is a name that I learned from a teacher named Kriti Konko in a class that I was in with her recently that just contextualizes everything that we've been going through. So I want to also presence this podcast episode in terms of time, a historical time. So right now, as I'm recording this, we are living at the intersection of multiple layered and connected global crises that are happening at the same time. We're sitting at the intersection of recovery from the COVID pandemic and what that has done to us economically, but also socially, societally, climate crisis, the rise of fascism and colonial violence in our world. We're watching a live stream genocide that is happening in Gaza, and it's connecting us to the brutalities of war and violence and human cruelty in ways and in speeds with the impacts of tech in ways that we've never seen before. We are in a time of social and political polarization, technology, late stage capitalism, colonization at large in many places in the world, and not to mention also the personal, maybe intrapersonal inside of us and interpersonal things that we are having to deal with just in our individual daily lives. And I mean, it may sound terribly grim and my stomach hurts even just naming all of these, but I offer this to you in the hope that if you've been feeling despair, you've been feeling lost, or you've been feeling hard, just to mirror back to you, like, this is real. It is true. It is here. We are here now. And I'm here today amidst all of that with the hope, with the open heart and the desire to share perhaps a perspective that will help your spirit be something actionable that you can use to navigate showing up and contributing to this world during these times, if that's something that you want to do. And if you're here, you're most likely the kind of human who does care and who really does want to do something. I also feel it important to say that one of the things that I require and is a standard for me in this space is that I am sharing to you as a fully fallible, flawed, figuring it out, not expert human here. I am walking this path with you. I have made mistakes or said things or done things that I have regretted in my own journey of showing up for justice or taking action in our world over the years that I've been doing this. I have fucked up. You will fuck up. I will fuck up. We all will, right? I will love certain orientations and views and perspectives during certain times, and I will likely change my mind. I believe deeply in paradox, holding true to truths at once, especially ones that seem seemingly oppositional to one another. And I believe in nuance. And what I require is that you respect me and you come from love in your speech towards me, as well as hopefully in a loving and open to receiving type of disposition to listening to this podcast. And if you're not available for that, you should probably not be listening to this. And I want you to know that I am just sharing perspectives and ideas and things that have been helping me really deeply on a personal level. And I don't even have the answers. I struggle inside of myself all of the time with, am I doing this right? Am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Is this helpful? Is this harmful? I am walking that with you. And if anything I say doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. And I respect you as a human being that is different from me. And I trust you always to discern and to listen to your inner wisdom or to honor wherever you are in this journey. Always, always, always. And I also dream of a world where we don't have to say these things, and this can just be the way that we all relate to each other as humans. I think that's already such medicine for polarization and being to listen to one another, which is what I think that the solution that we all need really is. I also share this because something that's really been emerging for me in my work and what I think is deeply missing for a lot of us that are feeling lost and that are feeling confused is that we are missing the rite of passage in our lives into our mature feminine leadership, in being a person who is lost and sort of in our maiden phase and like, oh my God, this is so terrible. Like, what is happening all around me? Oh, I feel helpless. One of my teachers, Sarah Durham Wilson, calls this being the princess in the burning tower. I think a lot of us feel almost like that princess in a burning tower. We're like, the flames are going up. I don't even know how to like run down these stairs, right? And I have a lot of compassion for that because I have been there too. But I am passionate about us growing into the queens, the non-binary royals, the kings, connected to the feminine heart, the feminine essence, not in a gendered way, but of love and a lot of the feminine qualities that we've forgotten in our society. I think that we are all here on this planet, and something that our souls are actually craving is growing into mature leadership in our way of being in the world, which is to say, growing up as adults to realize that no one is coming to save us from the burning tower. We are now the adults that are going to save us. And as daunting and as scary as that can be, I am the ruthless optimist that I am, who believes that we can all walk each other home. We can all come together. And if we do all come together in this view of, okay, I am here. I was born on this planet for a reason. I also deeply believe this. We all have a dharma. We all have a purpose. You have a purpose. You have a reason why you were born in this specific time and place in our humanity and in our planet. And part of my work is pointing you back to your brilliance, your power, your contribution, and reminding you that you are not a random, useless, powerless person like the powers that be would have you believe. I am here always to point you back to your love, your brilliance, and your creative power. So if that's something that you're into, let's get into it. I want to start by sharing with you how I came across this wisdom and a little bit of my story of just how I've been moving through this time, especially since everything had started escalating in Israel and Palestine. So when everything first began to escalate, with Israel's invasion of Palestine and, with the tragedy of the hostages and people being killed, I was triggered as fuck, right? As someone who is Vietnamese and whose ancestors lived through so much war and death and devastation at the hands of colonization, it impacted me deeply on a personal level. And it was really hard. Generational trauma came up for me, waves of despair and disbelief, and then anger and disappointment, confusion, wanting to make other people the enemy, wanting to convince people to get on my side, all of that guilt and learning, all of that stuff was coming up. And so, as I do whenever I'm in a hard place, I started to search and I started to look for answers. And I wanted, of course, as always, to learn from a perspective of love. I wanted to find a teacher and find an orientation through these times that it was rooted in compassion and rooted in connection to spirit, but also into taking action in our world, not spiritually bypassing. And so immediately I was drawn back to one of my teachers, Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh was a Zen Buddhist monk and peace activist who recently passed in 2022, bless his soul, and he was a prominent leader in the non-violent movement for peace in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. He was very prominent in bringing the realities of the tragedies of Vietnam to the American consciousness. And he was famous for many things, but famous for writing a letter to Martin Luther King Jr., which inspired Martin Luther King Jr. to actually begin speaking out against the war in Vietnam here in the United States. Dr. King also nominated Thich Nhat Hanh for the Nobel Peace Prize as their relationship and solidarity across the globe for one another's struggles and movements grew. He was also exiled from Vietnam for his commitment to peace and his refusal to take sides during the war. And his position was that of having peace for all sides, refusing to take sides, and centering a love for our common humanity. So I admire him for about a million reasons. Obviously, our values deeply align. And if you're here in the love, sex, and pleasure world, I imagine that it might for you too. But what I admire most about him is that his commitment was to centering us all as humans in a view of peace that really is about bringing us together, and for being a leader in what he called engaged Buddhism, which is a spirituality that isn't about bypassing, but that centers our spiritual practice, our love practice, through engaging and taking action in the world. So if you have been struggling with people who are spiritual bypassing or wanting to put their heads in the sand, and that is either frustrating for you or you don't know how to deal with the feelings, maybe even the grief that comes with, I think that he might be a teacher or someone's work that is really worth exploring more deeply for yourself. So I want to introduce you to his wisdom in his own words. And the passage I'm going to read you is from his letter to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called In Search of the Enemy of Man. And for context, he begins with a reference to the self-immolation of Buddhist monks in Vietnam, which at the time of this recording, we just had Aaron Bushnell also pass away here in the US from protesting via self-immolation, setting himself on fire in the name of bringing awareness to this cause of freeing Palestine in this past week. So also bless his soul. But here we go into this passage. The passage goes from In Search of the Enemy of Man. I believe with all my heart that the monks who burned themselves did not aim at the death of the oppressors, but only a change in their policy. Their enemies are not man. They are intolerance, fanaticism, dictatorship, cupidity, hatred, and discrimination which lie within the heart of man. I also believe with all my being that the struggle for equality and freedom you lead in Birmingham, Alabama, is not really aimed at the whites, but only at intolerance, hatred, and discrimination. These are the real enemies of man, not man himself. In our unfortunate fatherland, we are trying to plead desperately, do not kill man, even in man's name. Please kill the real enemies of man, which are present everywhere in our very hearts and minds. I also just want to read to you another way that he phrased this in another one of his books that is called Peace Begins Here, Palestinians and Israelis Listening to Each Other, which was a book that he wrote that was based on him going to Israel and Palestine and facilitating workshops for them to be able to come together in peace. So he writes in this book, when we sit in a circle, we can look at each other and recognize each other as human beings with a lot of suffering. It is possible to see that our true enemies are hate, fear, despair, and especially wrong perceptions. Human beings are not our enemies. So I'm just going to give you a second to sit with that, to digest that, see how it feels for you. And I know for me, when I read this, I personally felt a big shift, a big exhale in my bones and my heart. It made me look within myself at times where I have wanted to make other men, make other humans the enemies. And it really sparked something in me that just felt like an exhale of like, okay, perhaps this can be an orientation that I take. And it actually relates so much to the work that I do in love and sex and relationships, where oftentimes my clients come to me blaming themselves as humans or their partners for being unable to express their emotions or feeling like there's something wrong with themselves or that they're personally fallible as a human being for being afraid of their sexuality or not being able to express themselves or just punishing themselves in certain ways. And instead of looking at the root cause when my clients come to me, which is often rooted in systems of supremacy, systems of oppression that they've internalized, right? Patriarchy being the reason why they are so harsh against their bodies, toxic masculinity being the reason why maybe their partners aren't able to express to them emotionally, patriarchy as a reason why talking about sex and intimacy and loving one another can be so terribly hard at times. And I always point my clients back to, it's not a personal failing of you that you are feeling the way that you do. It is these larger systems, right? Again, it is the true enemy of shame, of patriarchy, of self-hatred, of body supremacy, of white supremacy, these waters that we live in. And in that way, we can turn towards what is really causing the pain instead of ourselves. And Thich Nhat Hanh is telling us the same thing. And I think that in these times right now, our common enemies are like, what would it be like for you to try this view on? This is something that I've been experimenting with. What if instead of being in despair about each other, we could really turn towards our common enemy is hatred. It is separation. It is the grief and the chaos and the lost feelings that we all have because we've been so separated from our own humanity and our own power in this world. What if we turned collectively towards the enemy is this white supremacy that makes us want to believe that we are different. This fallacy, this imaginative concept of race or even of gender, that put us in these boxes and keep us separate from one another, right? I think that there can be so much that we could all learn and be more effective in if we were to turn towards this view, to experiment with this view. And I'll also share how I have been taking this view into action and having it inform how I choose to show up in the world during these times. And so, particularly when it comes to what's happening in Gaza, I really identified for myself the true enemy, or I often think of it also as like the illness, like the sickness, the illness of our souls that I am really here to shift and be medicine for is colonialism, is white supremacy, is this fear and this illusion of separation that we have from one another, as well as a lack of education, parts of history that have been hidden from us. And so for me, I have shifted from I'm trying to get everyone to do something, or like getting so caught up in sort of like all of that drama that I think can drive us all crazy, and instead asking myself, if I am to show up to be the medicine against the true enemy, as Thich Nhat Hanh calls it, or the illness of our collective soul of white supremacy, how do I show up to be the medicine against that? How do I show up to be the medicine for colonialism? And one way that I can be the medicine, that I feel that I can be the medicine, is to amplify Palestinians' stories, is to make sure that history is being tracked, because such a part of the illness of colonialism is to erase history, is to deny what is actually happening, to deny the harm that is happening. That denial has been what has gotten us here in the first place. And so you can see how centering this has changed my action and made it feel clean in ways that feel in alignment with my values, that don't feel as punitive as some of the orientations that I had before were out of my despair and honestly out of my feelings of powerlessness and even my feelings of love and desire for people to come towards me. So I want to encourage you, right? What is the enemy, the true enemy, or the illness, the soul illness in our society that you see that you can be medicine for? How can you show up for that with your unique gifts? What would it look like to take responsibility as a grown adult in our world, in this place and time, and shift from the powerlessness of defeat and into creativity and imagination of action? So, if right now you think that one of the big enemies is actually harm and yelling at each other on the internet, how can you show up to be medicine for that? How can you step up into your leadership and show us how do we have these conversations that move towards peace and acknowledge suffering in ways that are nuanced, are peaceful, are rooted in love? If you are actually so passionate about being less online and taking direct action and doing things offline or supporting your communities, how can you be so passionate and so full of love that you really show up in your leadership to show us how to do that, right? How do you commit so deeply to then showing up in person, taking action, really checking in on your community, checking in on your friends? And so I think that this also just helps us feel more powerful, shifts us out of that lost feeling of what can I do? How do I relate to this? That often contributes so much to our despair and our confusion and our grief. And I can almost guarantee you, you will feel better in action. So much of your turmoil is coming from this deflated defeat. Take care of the part of you that feels defeated. Tend to it, care for it, have compassion for it. Recognize it as the part of you that's been suppressed and sick with this illness from society that you didn't bring upon yourself, but that has been the waters that you've been swimming in, and then reach for the medicine. And one thing that I will say is I do not believe that we can just idly sit by. Nothing is going to change in that way. The status quo and the legacy that we have inherited without choice is violence, it is hate, it is separation. And so if we cruise comfortably by and turn away, we are enabling that status quo, and that fucking sucks. It's not fair. I don't want it either. It's not what we chose. I know it's not what you chose, but it's real. And if none of us turn towards it, it continues to eat us alive and leave us in the destruction that's leading to our despair and in its wake. And that action, like I said, I think is the medicine that you are probably looking for. It will make you feel better. Pray, talk to a friend. Kellen and I actually join hands and we pray. I ask him to sit with me and pray during times where these things feel really hard. And, I will pray for everyone to be free of these true common enemies of man. I have prayed that Joe Biden and the leaders in our government right now be free of the sickness of white supremacy, be free from the sickness of scarcity and domination and power over one another. I have prayed for many other things, but I just wanted to illuminate that again as a way that in this Buddhist perspective, I am trying to hold the humanity of everybody involved. And there are so much nuance here around action accountability. I think those are absolutely needed too. So I don't want to open up that whole bag, but what I wanted to do was just really seed this idea, this perspective, maybe this like little shift in view to you from this beloved teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, that I hope will make you feel better. And I do also just want to leave with reminding you that you are part of a tapestry, and our hyper individual society, and even probably some of the people screaming at you online, will make it feel like there's an expectation for you to save the world. And that is an impossible thing. You alone cannot save the world. Me alone, I cannot save the world. But you were made and you were placed here to be a part of this world, to contribute to this world. And if we all do that, if we can all show up to that, if more and more of us shift together to do that, I really do believe that we can make change. I believe that we can see change happening now. It's not as clear and actionable as I think we would really like it to be. Again, paradox, but things are shifting. Things are changing because of this turning towards and being the medicine that so many of us in our individual ways are doing. And I also want to let you know, if you have been dealing with your own personal stuff, if it's been too hard, if you've been confused at how to navigate this, it's never too late. It's never too late to do something, share something, say something, be in a conversation with someone in your life, to acknowledge your grief, to pause and stop and talk to your partner about how this is affecting you. It's not too late. It's never too late to act in love. So I hope that this helped. Holy shit, I'm just gonna be human. Like, this is a really big process for me. This is been things that I've been holding inside of me. Y'all, it took me hours to record this. And so I would love to hear your thoughts. I will share resources in the show notes, both Thich Nhat Hanh's letter, other pieces of his work, and books that you can look into. And I am just sending you so much love. I hope this fortified you, and I will catch you in the next episode.